Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I'll be going over the 2 million DPS solo build on the Mir Strikewing Escort, and I'll also be going over the strategy used for doing solo infected space elites with it. As always, chapters to each topic are listed down below. And before I get too far into things, I have a couple of quick notes and disclaimers to go over. First, this build is heavily specialized for chasing solo elite DPS records, meaning that it is extremely expensive and specifically tailored for that environment. And second, with regards to performance, the record runs were done on accounts with completed space endeavors and were specifically done during lower activity hours to achieve better server performance. And remember, in STO, just copying a build will not result in the same performance. How you fly your ship and how you time abilities has an enormous impact, which is why later in the video I'll also be breaking down what I did in that record run. And the ship for this build is the Mir Strikewing Escort, also known as the Mir Engle. It is a lockbox ship that was added as an account-wide unlock for purchasing the 12th anniversary bundle, and due to its Starship Traits superior area denial, which you may know better as SAD, it was a very popular incentive to go for the entire 12th bundle. It's not the newest ship, but what Mara found when looking for the optimal solo ISC platform, it is the only ship out there that is suited to take advantage of the current meta for the purposes of setting solo DPS records with an energy weapon build. Of which those requirements are a 5-2 weapon setup, an experimental weapon slot for the Hexa cannons, a hangar bay for Type 7s, a very unconventional systems friendly bridge officer layout, ideally with temporal and intel specializations on it, and with those requirements, the only ship that matches all of them is the Mir Engle. There's no other ship out there currently that meets all of these requirements. And heading into the build, let's start with the weapons. Up front are 5 of the ultimate plasma dual heavy cannons. These have been the top pick for DPS chasing with plasma CSV for a while now, ever since the travel time issue with Viridians was discovered. Realistically though, you could use any plasma variant you want here. I could have achieved the exact same results with nearly any plasma variant, even crafted. The 2.5% chance proc that is per cycle on these weapons goes off so rarely that they don't actually have much impact. And for the Aft Weapons, things are much more locked in. The first thing here is the Omnidirectional Pavin Proton Beam Ray from the Pavo event earlier in 2024. If you missed this event, it is still available to buy out for 2,500 Zen, and that buyout is available up through February 15th of 2025. What makes this so special is that when you hit Cannon Scatter Volley, it gets Fire at Will for the entire time you have CSV out, and the Resonance Shock proc from it does a ton of damage. Between the weapon and the proc, it accounted for a total of 14% of my total damage in that 2 million DPS run. And then the other thing here is the Plasmatic Biomatter Auto Turret. This is from the Lobby store. It has a base cost of 200 Lobby, but it does frequently go on sale down to 160 Lobby. And the reason that this is special is that the additional shot it does from the auto turret portion of it results in some extra procs of complex plasma fires on nearby foes. It is a substantial boost for a plasma CSV build that is utilizing the complex plasma fires trait. And for the experimental weapon, this is the prototype phaser hexa cannons from the Zen Store Achilles American Worker Heavy Destroyer that has a cost of 3,000 Zen. As I've covered before, this is the best experimental weapon in the game, and it does not need to be on a phaser build in order to perform well. In total, it accounted for 10% of the damage in that 2 million run, and it did almost as much damage as 2 of my dual heavy cannons. And heading over to the DECS, for the deflector and core, I used the Disco Rep set pieces entirely for the 2-piece set bonus, which provides 120% whole regen. There are better items that can go in these slots to boost damage, but at the end of the day, I still needed some survivability, and this was one of the easiest and most effective options I had. And for the engine and shield, I ran the competitive Reputation's Innovated Engines, which provide a substantial speed and turn boost, some defense, and tactical bridge officer cooldown reduction every time I hit a bridge officer firing mode. Getting from point A to point B as fast as possible is part of getting higher DPS results, and these engines are a centerpiece on many DPS builds due to that speed boost. As for the shield, I covered this in my recent meta update video, but these are the Kittimer shields from the 2024 Flagship Celebration event. If you missed that event, the buyout for it is still available until February 15th of 2025, and it will set you back 2,500 Zen. On the 2 million DPS run, these shields did 91k DPS or 4.5% of my total damage. If you don't have these and you missed the buyout, you can use the Discovery Reputation shield in its place to get the 3-piece set bonus with the other 2 pieces already on the build. The 3-piece has Mycelial Lightning, which does some damage. It's going to be a bit under half the damage that the Kittimer shield does, but it's better than nothing. Next up is devices. For the slotted devices, I ran a large Oxbat, Deuterium Surplus, Subspace Field Modulator, Temporal Negotiator, and the Kobayashi Maru Transponder. I also have the Battery Expertise node selected in my skill tree to double the duration of some batteries and devices. In addition, I had some other devices in boost active that work without being slotted. First is the prototype Ablative Jevonite hardpoints, which you can acquire from some DOF missions and packs or via the player exchange. These provide a substantial boost to your hull capacity for 15 minutes, so if you're looking for something to boost your survivability, they're pretty nice to have on hand. And from my fleet, I had the Fleet Combat buff active on my Fleet Research Lab, which provides me with a 20% Cat 1 all damage buff, 20% max hull capacity, and a 10% speed and turn rate boost. And I also had the 3 plus 10 elite skill boost active from my fleet starbase. These cost 2,500 fleet credits per, and they provide a plus 10 skill boost to their corresponding category for 4 hours upon activation. These are a very small boost, so I would only recommend them if you're pushing for the absolute maximum. And heading over to the consoles, for the Universal Engineering slots, all 4 have plasma modded isomags in them. If you're not familiar with isomags, check out my breakdown for them, which is linked down below. And for the science consoles, the first is Fleet Power from the Awani, which is a must slot on any energy weapon build due to the amount of haste it can provide. This costs 3000 Zen. Next up is Agony Redistributor from the Zen Adamant, another 3000 Zen. When timed right, this console can do a ton of damage. After that is Adaptive Emergency Systems, which provides a nice damage and survivability boost. This is available from several different Zen ships. I think the old engineering variants of the T6 flagships. It's also on the legendary variants, so the Legendary Odyssey, Scimitar, and Borderskew all come with it, but at a minimum, you're looking at 3000 Zen if you don't already have it. And the last tier is the Valdor console, which I talked about in the meta update. This can be acquired from the Tier 3 Valdor in the shipyard for 75,000 dilithium. This console provided 34k out of the 38k healing per second I had in my run, making it a critical part of the build. Without it, I would not have had that level of survivability. And heading over to the TAC consoles, the first here is the Gemini device from the Premonition. This costs 3000 Zen, and the clicking on this console summons in the Enterprise, which does a good bit of damage, but it also provides a 20% weapon firing cycle haste buff for 30 seconds, which impacts experimental weapons as well. Then there is Subspace Fracture, also known as the Voving console. Every 30 seconds you can hit this to teleport. You can also use it without teleporting, as I've shown in the past, and this also provides 25% console cooldown reduction every time you activate it. Then there is the Custom Power Matrix console from the Ilios, which I talked about in the meta update. Then there is the DPRM from the Atlas, which you can now buy account-wide through the Muds Dread Through the Ages choice pack. So that is going to be 14,750 Zen when a Muds bundle sale is active. And then there is the Micro Quantum Torp Phalanx Ray from the Achilles, another 3000 Zen ship. When you time this right, it can do a ton of damage, and it also has a nice turn and flight speed buff on it. And next up for the Hangar Bay, unsurprisingly, I am using the Elite Type 7 shuttlecraft. The Type 7s are unlocked from having the Awani, which is the same ship that has the Fleet Power Network Array console, and the reason that these pets are used is because they provide an absurdly large amount of debuff, which is helping me do more damage. And the elite version of these that I'm running come from the Fleet Starbase, and they're going to set you back about 100,000 fleet credits and around 40,000 dilithium. And heading over to the bridge officers, I was using Superior Romulan Operatives, but Watchers would work perfectly fine as well. For the Commander attack, I had Beam Overload 1, Torp Spread 2, Attack Pattern Beta 2, and Cannon Scatter Volley 3. The Beam Overload and the Torp Spread are there for the competitive reputation engines and also the Cultural Conquest trait, which I'll talk about later. On the Lieutenant Commander side, these are all uncon abilities, so Jam Targeting Sensors 1, Scramble Sensors 1, and Gravity Well 1. On the Lieutenant Commander Universal with Temporal, that is set to a science, but everything on it is temporal, so Heisenberg Amplifier 1, Chronometric Inversion Field 1, and Timeline Collapse 1. Again, those are all uncon. For the Lieutenant Engineer with Intel, I have Emergency Powered Engines 1, and then Override Subsystem Safeties 2. And for the Ensign Universal, that is set to a Psi, and that has Tractor Beam 1, which is another uncon proc. And heading over to the personal space traits, the first here is a Good Day to Die. This is enabling me to hit Go Down Fighting at any HP level. Adaptive Offensive is providing me with some crit chance, which then turns into crit severity. Duelist Fervor is netting me some Cat 1 all damage and some accuracy. Then I have Fireball Escape here, and this basically just makes you immune to every Warp Core breach. Then I was messing around with Liberated Borg Kingdom Nanoprobes from the 14th bundle, but that is a trait that you could most certainly replace with something else. And then there's Fragment of AI Tech, which is providing some control expertise and also some Cat 1 energy weapon damage, which scales based on your control expertise skill. Intel Handler for the crit chance. Intelligence Agent Attaché for the Captain ability recharge upon weapon critical strikes. Terran Targeting Systems for the critical severity. The Boimler effect for the Bridge Officer cooldown reduction. And of course, Unconventional Systems for the Universal Console recharge upon hitting control Bridge Officer abilities. So 9 out of the 11 traits here are from the Infinity Lockbox, and you can acquire them on the exchange for around 40 to 50 million EC per. And then Boimler is going to set you back 200 Lobi, or around 60 million EC. And again, Liberated Borg is from the 14th anniversary bundle, but I was just playing around with it. You could swap that out for any other trait you have. And for the Starship traits here, the first is Complex Plasma Fires from the Gorn Hunter. That is going to be around 1.5 billion EC. For all the lockbox ships I look at here, I'm just going to assume a conservative price point of 1.5 billion EC. Sometimes you might be able to get them a little bit cheaper, but 1.5 is just a safe guess. Now, Complex here is a core part of Plasma builds, and it accounted for a total of 12.5% of the total damage I had in that run. Next up is Cultural Conquest. This is from the World Raiser, another lockbox ship, so another about 1.5 billion EC. And when you hit firing modes, this gives you a stack of a Cat 1 damage buff, and if you damage foes that have debuffed, applied a dot to you, or controlled you, that will double up to a 50% buff, and it will remove a debuff from you. So in theory, this can provide me with up to 150% Cat 1 from me hitting Beam Overload, Torpedo Spread, and Cannon Scatter Volley I have on the build. Then, of course, is Superior Area Denial for the debuff. This is off the mere Engle, the ship I'm flying. And Withering Barrage, which you can get off a Zen ship or you can get free from a KDF recruit. That is for the Cannon Scatter Volley extension, so it has 14 out of 15 second uptime. And for the other 3 traits here, we have Terran Goodbye from the Mir Warship. Currently, this is, again, around 1.5 billion EC. It is a lockbox ship. That provides you up to 15% crit chance and 75 accuracy. Then there is the Ruin of Our Enemies. That is a promotional ship, but it is now in the Disco Inferno Muds bundle, so you can pick it up on account-wide unlock for 14,750 Zen during a Muds bundle sale. That trait provides up to 300% Cat 2 all damage, and also a good bit of Bridge Officer cooldown reduction. And the last trait here is Universal Designs from the Crossfield Refit, another lockbox ship that's going to be about 1.5 billion AC. This provides up to 10% crit chance and 50% severity from activating Universal Consoles, which is a key part of what you're doing with this build. For the reputation traits, everything here is pretty standard. Advanced Targeting Systems from the Dyson Reputation, that's 20% critical severity. Energy Refrequencer from the Iconian rep, that's going to give you some healing. Magnified Firepower from the Gamma rep, that's some Cat 2 bonus weapon damage. If you have your Aux power high enough, you could also do the Nukara Aux Offensive. Then there's Precision from the Romulan rep for 5% crit chance, and Tyler's Duality from the Discovery Reputation for some more crit chance that scales with your hull capacity. And for the active rep traits, Anti-Time Biomolecular Shield Gen, Deploy Sensor Interference Platform, Quantum Singularity Manipulation, and Refracting Tetryon Cascade. And heading over to the duty officers, the first one here is the Emergency Column Hologram. This is from the Phoenix store, and what this does is when you hit emergency powered engines, it resets the cooldown on evasive maneuvers. With speed being so important, having the ability to reset evasive and get it up a bit more, that is pretty helpful. Agent Isle. The Fed version of this is Agent Nerul, and it is from the Delta Operations expansion pack, which is going to cost you about $100 during a sale. There is also a cheaper version that you can get nowadays on the exchange called Dial Rel, but it does not work as well. And what this does is when you hit attack pattern beta, each outgoing weapon shot will restore 0.2% of your maximum hull capacity. So that can end up being a pretty good survivability buff, especially on a high haste build. Next up is 26 of 47. When you hit attack abilities, 15% chance to improve damage over time by 50% for 30 seconds. And when you hit temporal abilities, 30% chance to improve critical chance by 2.5% for 30 seconds. This stuff is not cheap. It is around 600 million right now, and will probably go up after this video goes live. Next up is 27. You have a 15% chance when hitting attack abilities to improve your crit severity by 20% for 30 seconds, and when you hit intel abilities, 30% chance to improve critical chance by 2.5% for 30 seconds. And next up is 31 to 47. You have a 15% chance when hitting psi abilities to improve damage over time by 50% for 30 seconds. And hitting temporal abilities is a 30% chance to improve exotic damage by 25% for 30 seconds. Now, 27, as you guys all know, is pretty expensive. There is a cheap KDF one up. Someone could snag that up for 730 and probably flip it. But that'll probably be gone by the time you see this. And for 31, that's around 4 to 500 mil right now. And the other DOF here is the Battery Quartermaster. I talked about this on the meta update. This allows you to spam the large aux bats a bit more, which is needed with how often you're going to be able to hit Fleet Power Network Array. And on the active ground side of things, there is two DOFs here that impact space. Elder Malikaton from the Gamma Recruitment, that's 10% Cat 1, all damage. And then Neil Falconer, which is from the Phoenix story now, I believe, and this is another 5% Cat 1 all damage against the Borg. Next up is the skill tree and specialization. The skill tree is very close to what I showed in my guide earlier in 2024, just with the point over in DrainX. And for the specializations, Intel Primary for the flanking, and Temporal Operative Secondary for the damage over time perks that offers, which synergize very well with these plasma setups. And next up is my power and control settings. For power, I've just done max into weapons and the rest into auxiliary. However, given that I am running that large aux bat with the battery quartermaster, I could probably afford to drop some from aux and shift it over to engines and still be perfectly fine. As for the controls, I went over these in the Woven Breakdown video earlier this year, where I showed you how to use the Woven console without teleporting. I'll include a link to that video down below. And next up is my tray and keybind setup. I'm still rocking the keybinds from my torpedo setup way back in the day, though I have removed the Fire All Weapons command from my keybinds, as spamming that command is believed to contribute to misfires. Instead, I just use the maintain auto attack setting that I showed on the controls, and I just manually fire my weapons once at the start of a match, and they keep going on their own because I have auto fire enabled on them. Now, for these keybinds, the abilities are activated from left to right, and with this build, I'm only using the following keybinds. Key F for tray 10, which is my primary spam bar for my normal ability rotation. Key G for tray 9, which is my alpha bar for some of the larger damage buffs I have. And spam bars for tray 1, which is for pets and to catch if either my prototype ablative or fleet skill buffs fall off in combat. Anything in trays 2 through 8 are manually activated. And I had a request to give a price estimate, so here is a very rough guess that I put together. I'm probably missing something, but my guess is you're looking at about 68,200 Zen worth of ships and bundles, and another 8.6 billion of lockbox and promo ships, in addition to some of the gear and traits you'd pick up on the exchange instead. Now, to get 8 billion EC, that's going to be a bit of money on its own. You're looking at as little as 400 bucks to potentially upwards of 800, which does mean combined with the Zen cost there, approaching 600-700 bucks, depending on if you get your Zen during a sale. You're looking at over $1,000 to put this build together if you had absolutely none of the components. Now, thankfully for those of you watching, I think most of you already have many of the components that this build consists of. So it's not going to be as expensive for most of you to go out and replicate this build because you've already got most of the pieces. But if you're someone brand new trying to copy this, like most endgame builds, it is going to be pretty expensive. And heading over to the run breakdown and strategy. So at the start here, you're going to see I fire my weapons and I target the cube here, and I also click to have my weapons start firing. So that just is enabling auto fire so that when I am in range, they will automatically start to shoot the enemy. At around 25 to 24 seconds, I'm going to hit my emergency powered engines. That way, I'm planning to hit evasive around 4 to 5 seconds on the briefing phase timer. So as soon as evasive finishes, I want to be able to hit emergency powered engines again and reset the cooldown of it thanks to that emergency con hologram duty officer. At 20 seconds, I'm going to hit my large Oxbat, and I also turn the Ilios console toggles on. So I'm hitting the large Oxbat this early on because I want to have it ready to go again for the Fleet Power Network Array for the left side. At just under 10 seconds, I start to hit some of the buffs that have longer activation times, like the fleet abilities, and I hit my tactical initiative. I did make a mistake here by not staggering my firing modes. If I'd staggered them, say, hit beam overload at 10 seconds on the briefing phase, the torp spread at 5, and then the CSV at 0, there would have been a gap for me to get more speed boost out of the prevailing innervated engines. You're seeing me hit more of my main buffs here, and I'm going to hit override subsystem safeties and then immediately hit my fleet power network array. And I hit that fleet power while there was only about a second or two left on the aux battery. So I still had that max power buff in effect there. Then as I go in, I'm hitting all my universal consoles, and once I've hit my universal console clickies, I am going to hit the Voven console. I'm going to stay targeted to the Borg cube because I'm already in front of it, so it doesn't really matter if it puts me in front of it. And that the Agony redistributor on this board cube here, with me unloading on it with all the buffs that I have right here at the start, all the consoles, it's doing a lot of splash damage through Agony redistributor to all of the nearby foes. And then as soon as that dies, I am using a deuterium to try and get over to the left side. I'm trying to position here so that I can hit those back generators. And I want to be able to use my timeline collapse on the transformer to suck in the spheres here. The Voven console just became available to use again. I could have saved it and used it to help get to the other side faster, but typically what I was doing in these runs is I would deselect the transformer here and just use it without teleporting. I've got my evasive up now, and I'm heading over to the right side. Unfortunately, I made a mistake here. The reason I moved so slow from the left to the right is because halfway through, I hit the Gemini console, and there's a bug with the Gemini console where when you activate it, it massively slows you down, and that cost me a couple seconds here. So I had to wait for a firing mode to come back up for me to get the next competitive engine proc, and then I was able to get over to the right side. Now at the right side, I've got Agony Redistributor back up again, and with that, I'm getting a lot of splash damage to all of the secondary targets here, so I'm just focusing on the transformer. I am intentionally not hitting Gravwell or the Achilles console here. I want to save those for the gateway. And I'm trying to hit my fleet power network array before I hit Voven again. So you may have seen too, I also hit a large Oxbat before I hit fleet power there. Now I had deselected the transformer and hit the Voven there, so I did not teleport when I used that console. Now for the gateway, the tip that I got from Mara here that was really helpful was to just save my Gravwell and QSM, Quantum Singularity Manipulation. So just save it for the gateway here and get everything up here and slam the Achilles console into them. So QSM, then a Gravwell on the gateway, and then buff up with Go Down Fighting and DPRM, and hit the Achilles console. And if you look at the DPS numbers over at the left here, you're going to see as the Achilles console hits all the spheres up here, it's going to do a massive jump in the DPS output. It's a really large spike. So from the low 1.8 mil range up to 1.965, just from hitting the Achilles console on that big group of enemies there. And before the gateway's even dead, I've already swapped over to targeting the cube. If I go back a smidge here, you'll see with the gateway, it's got a bunch of complex plasma fire stacks on it. So I already know it's going to die, and I can just shift my focus over to the attack cube and just let the gateway die to the plasma dot. Again, deselecting the cube before I hit my Voven console. That way it doesn't teleport me in front of the cube, and I can still retain my flanking bonus from the intel specialization. And at this point, it's pretty much just tossing everything I have at this. So hitting all the buffs, everything I've got, and just throwing everything I can at this board cube. And it takes a little bit to get through the cube there because of the HP and the shield staying up, but if I go back here, you can see it's stacked at 100 stacks of the complex plasma fires proc on it, so there was a pretty hefty plasma dot hitting it. And let's see if we can catch that number here. Critical 815,520. Yeah, so the plasma dot is doing quite a bit there. And again, as I said in that video, huge thanks to Tamara for pointing me towards trying the mirror Engle out. It really is the best platform we currently have available for doing the solo ISC runs with an energy weapon build, and also for the tip there with the Achilles console at the gateway. That console does so much more if you have everything grouped up. So yeah, it's a bit complicated, but once you get used to the build, it's not really that bad. It's just making sure you're hitting your consoles before you hit some of your uncons, and just making sure you're using the Voven at the right spots, the right time. But once you get used to it, this build will destroy whatever content you're throwing it against. And as for the parse here, this is available to look at on the Oscar website, so I will include a link to it down below. But you can see the Ultimate Plasma DHCs under CSV3 did 540k DPS, Complex Plasma Fires 553k, and that is without the Lure Team console on there or the Fakiri. It just did a crazy amount there. Resonance Shock from the Pavan Omni, just doing its thing. The prototype phaser hexacannons showing again that they are the best experimental weapon we currently have access to. The board cube here is the Agony Redistributor. It will show up in your parse as whatever you used it against. The targeted and seeking microquantum are the Achilles console, so combined those did quite a bit. You can see another line here for Agony when I used it at the right side. The auto defense turret, and the auto defense turret does have another line that shows up down below. That is for the effect that turret has with the secondary shot it does, which again is giving you more stacks of complex plasma fire. So for the rest of the parse, nothing here is really that surprising. You can see the Gemini console, the Enterprise that was summoned in, did 35k. The shield has a line for front, right, rear, and left. So you have to add those up to see the full performance of it. But, again, as I said earlier, it did pretty well. And the Pavan Beam, again, that has fire at will the entire time you have CSV up. So with Withering Barrage, 14 out of 15 second uptime, the Pavan Beam has fall up, the exact same time. So it does pretty well. And then you add in that Resonance Shock proc, and it is crazy how good that thing is. But nothing else on here is really that surprising. Again, I'll have a link to this down below if you want to take a closer look at it. And that's going to be it for today. If you have any questions about this build, feel free to ask them down below, or join the Builds Discord where myself, Mara, or many others can give you some advice. And as always, thank you to all channel members and viewers for the continued support. See you guys around.